Okay, folks. So I'm going to be accompanying the Punk Guilt vlogs, which will entail video logs of the people of Punk Guilt, including myself, such as the videographer that I introduced with the initial video that I posted only moments ago. However, I'm going to accompany each of those vlogs with also a personal vlog on this journey that I'm taking because this is a very personal journey for me as well. It's something that I did not expect to happen. It kind of just came out of the blue on it, and it's kind of thrown my little world into something that is uncertain and not easy to grasp. So I'm still kind of coming to terms with what's happened and how quickly it's happened. And I guess these vlogs and the reformation of the band itself is an attempt to make amends and make sure that whatever I do as a result of this is something positive, and it's something that can help other people and can give people some measure of joy, and also give people some kick-ass rock and roll because that's really the crux of it. So I'd like to talk a little bit about my journey arriving here. Back in my essentially hometown, I had to take a bus from my location to a big city, Denver. So that was quite the experience. Not that was actually very simple. Nothing really happened. The most that happened is that I stopped into a coffee shop prior to getting on the bus and asked one of the coffee shop employees how he felt about the bus and my getting my bike to Denver. I had a really great and tragically, well, not, I shouldn't say tragically. It was a very expensive e-bike. So it was something else. I was always complimented on my bike when I rode it around town. So it was definitely an eye catcher, and it was something that people thought was an amazing thing. Nonetheless, he said, "Oh, you should have no problems with that bike. You know that should you should be able to get that on the bus." And I said, "Hey, man, if I can't get it on the bus, the bike's yours, okay?" And he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, of course. You know, you've been such a great help. You're very kind. You're a local in town. I always want to help out the locals. That's why whenever I go into another city, I never eat at a fast food restaurant or a chain restaurant. I also try not to shop at a chain grocery store. I like to give to the local communities that I visit, so I'll always eat at a place that's local." But nonetheless, the bike got onto the bus, and I had a very worry-free, well, I shouldn't say worry-free, I was very worried, but I had a very easy ride out to Denver. And what was really cool is that the bus trip took me on a route that allowed me to kind of say goodbye to the things that I had grown accustomed to while living out there. Um, and it was a very small town. And I did have the pleasure of being able to help at one of the local museums in town while I lived there. It wasn't very often, just a few times here and there, but nonetheless, I always enjoyed it when I was there. Um, it was a very fun job. It was also, a job connected to the history of that region, which kind of enriched my own understanding, not only of the culture but of the history of that region. And I felt like I was, I always tried to learn as much as I could about the region in my spare time, so I could, become a little bit more one with it. Nonetheless, the bus trip took me past that location. I got a chance to see it one last time, which really made me happy. And then, of course, going out to Denver, we often took trips out to Denver, and I was able to, again, kind of follow the same path that we took out to Denver each time and say goodbye to some of the monuments, some of the mountains, some of the interesting looking mountains. There was a mountain with a crater in it, and I had always speculated to the person I was with that would eventually be another future home of ours, like living in the middle of this crater. Of course, it was a joke, but I got to see that, which really made me happy. Um, and overall, it was a really nice bus ride. And then I got to Denver, and that's when things started to sink in a little bit. That's when I realized, oh, I'm going back to a big city, and I haven't been used to a big city atmosphere for quite some time. So just being around um, those types of people, and that type of noise and commotion, it was really strangely really easy to blend in to again. I really actually felt very comfortable. I didn't feel uncomfortable. I didn't feel as if I was, I didn't feel like my head was on a complete swivel where every little noise kind of bothered me. Everything came very easy. In fact, I met a lot of really great people while I was at the Denver Union Station. But one thing in particular happened that was quite jarring and a little bit disappointing, is that they wouldn't let me take the bike on the train. It weighed 6 pounds over the required weight for the bicycle itself. So unfortunately, I had to turn around, and well, there I see this tactical police officer right there, and I said, "Hey, man, do you want to buy a bike?" Or actually, I just said, "Hey, do you want this bike?" And he was like, "Well, oh my God," because it's a beautiful bike. He looked at me, looked at it, and said, "Yeah, that would be awesome." And I'm like, "Okay." And I didn't mention that it was for sale. But I kind of gave him a little bit of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, nudge kind of thing. And he eventually said, "Hey, I can give you $60 for it." And I said, "Well, is there any way you could stretch it to 100?" And he's like, "No, that's all I got, unfortunately." And I'm like, "Okay, well, it's yours then." Now, keep in mind, this bike, I believe, cost anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000. So I was taking well, actually, I wasn't taking a hit on the bike. It was a gift. So it's not as if I bought the bike myself. It was a gift to me. So it didn't feel as bad selling it. I didn't want to sell it. It would have really, it would have been really useful where I am. And I could have just used that instead of paying money for the bus, which I'll have to use now. Nonetheless, I sold it, gave him all the parts, and I was on my way. Then, of course, I was just waiting around the general area. I went and had I had one small beer, a Saison, at the terminal bar. And it was at that moment that things just started to happen. And it was really kind of confusing for me, because these things that I'm about to tell you didn't happen before for quite some time. I ended up, while drinking that beer at the terminal bar, I ended up writing 3 poems. And I'm not going to recite these poems now. Okay, I'm not going to do that. But it was surprising, because I hadn't written a poem in probably about, prior to these 3 poems, and they came out of me consecutively. Probably since, maybe, I mean, I call songs poems, so I'm probably going to say, maybe 2018, so 6 years, which kind of coincides with the time I had met the person I was with. I hadn't written a single poem. I think maybe one small one, like maybe in 2020, but I really don't think so. I'd be hard-pressed to find that poem. So I wrote 3 poems while in that bar, drinking that one beer, and it just astounded me. And I wrote down a few other, thoughts for something that I might flesh out into a story at some point. In fact, I got an idea for a story, at least the title for the story. The title, I believe I was going to call it Gone to Grand. Wait, what was I going to call it? Gone to Grand, then Gone Again. And it was essentially going to be a collection of my experiences moving out to where I did, how it affected me, and such. Nonetheless, the train was coming soon. I went over to catch it, and I couldn't help thinking that the person that I had been with for such a long time was going to, like a movie, was going to burst through the doors and, and scream out my name. And I would, tumble to the ground in a mess of tears and sadness and, well, not sadness, but happiness, tears and happiness. And crumble to the ground, and she would come up and hold me and say, Jordan, I'm sorry, but come on, let's go home. But, of course, that didn't happen. And, does it happen? I don't think those things really happen in real life. All right, so then I was waiting for the train. And while I was in line at the train, and a few people were a little put off by this, I actually ended up writing a song. And I think it's a really good song. And it's going to be one of the songs that I'm not sure if I'm going to approach Punk Guilt about this song or maybe somebody else. I'm not certain. I mean, it would really have to be, it's of course a sad love song. But it's a really good song, and I was singing it in line, singing the basic, verse and chord progressions in line, and though people were a little bit put off by it, it didn't seem as if they were annoyed. So I really think this might be a really great song in the future, and I'm hoping as we move forward with all of this documentation, that's a song that I can end up finishing for everybody here that joins me. Other than that, we got onto the train. The train ride was very incredible. I've never actually been on an Amtrak before. I didn't know anything about it. I've never ridden one. But it had a dining car, a cafe. They served alcohol. The chair was incredibly comfortable. You could lean back and sleep, and it was really cool. Of course, I didn't imbibe that entire train ride. In fact, I'm not much of an imbiber these days. I will have a beer or two, or maybe even 3 on occasion, but I tend to stay away from getting completely shit-faced. So, and that will be one big difference between now and the previous Punk Guilt. The previous Punk Guilt that I was in, which was pre-2019, I got shit-faced a lot. That is not happening this time through. But nonetheless, and that's what we were. I always thought of us as kind of a drinking band, which is fine. I'm a big follower of another drinking band, Guided by Voices. I'm a big fan of them, and that's what they do. They get shit-faced for their shows, and I think they still do that. But that probably won't happen with us, at least with me. I don't care what anybody else does in the band. That's up to them. All right, so we're on the train, and I'm just going to, some brief highlights regarding this. I'll try not to make this video last too much longer. So we're on the train, and there was one, during the evening of the first night, everything got very, very strange and surreal. And there were these people that were talking in the seats in front of mine, and it was 2 guys. And they were talking about prison, they were talking about killing people, they were talking about beating people up, they were talking about all this weird shit. And I'll try not to, swear too much, but I think these videos are a little bit more conducive to there being some expletives rather than my video game streaming videos. I really want to keep those videos clean. These types of videos, I'm not too concerned about that. So if you're bothered by the word shit, by all means, don't watch. Nonetheless, they were talking about all these weird things. This guy claimed to be a bodyguard for Mickey Rourke, and he tried to teach Mickey Rourke how to be more of a defensive boxer, because I guess Mickey Rourke was an offensive boxer, and he had no skill, putting up his guarding. And he was talking about that all night. And then I wandered into the observation car. And I was just sitting there staring at the complete darkness because it was dark outside. You couldn't see anything. And when you're going that fast, there's really nothing to see. Just staring into the darkness. And that one guy who claimed to be Mickey Rourke's bodyguard came and sat like a few seats down from me. And he was acting very, very nervous and very fidgety. And he kept on digging in his shoes. And it was just, and then everything got really super surreal. I felt like I was tripping on acid. It's like all the lights just started flickering, and the room got really dark for a moment, and all the colors of the room just seemed to take on this really macabre, dire kind of tone. Like the reds got darker and the yellows got darker, and everything just seemed like I was floating through this weird dream. So then I rose from this seat and walked back to my seat in the coach section, and I just sat there, and they had these blue lights on the ceiling and these blue lights on the ground. We had to be super quiet. Nobody could talk during that time. It was quiet time. Even though people still talked, you know how it is. People still want to do what they want to do. But everything just seemed very still and very eerie, and there was a low buzz in the train, and the sound of the wheels on the tracks, and it just felt like, and I was looking outside into this darkness, and it just felt like I was seeing these faces, floating by the train, and of course it was around 2-3 in the morning, so it was like within, I believe that is called the witching hour. I think that happens around 3 a.m. It just felt like I was being surrounded by ghosts, and it surrounded like I was being. It felt like I was being surrounded by just all these things, and yet none of them could touch me. It was as if I was completely protected in this strange bubble of whatever, who knows what. So then I managed to get some sleep, a very small amount of sleep. I was kind of taking micro naps the entire evening until about 7:30 a.m. And then they woke us up for breakfast. Of course, I didn't have the the train breakfast because it was like way too expensive, like $45. So I went down and got a coffee cake and some coffee. And after having that, I wandered into the observation car again, and I encountered a wonderful gentleman by the name of Dennis. And he was a hobo guitar player who's been homeless for decades. And we talked about what had happened with me. We talked about being musicians. We sang lyrics to some of our favorite songs to each other. He told me about his guitar. He told me about his life. I told him about my life. It was just a really great conversation that lasted about an hour and a half. It was a very long conversation because it was just so enjoyable to be able to talk with somebody like that. And he's been a musician since, I believe he said, the late 60s or early 70s, just traveling the entire countryside playing music. And I think he just plays covers. He says he doesn't do any originals, whereas I'm an original musician. I don't do any covers. We talked about John Prine. We talked about Leonard Cohen. In fact, he told me his favorite song was Bird on the Wire, which is a great song by Leonard Cohen. If you guys ever want to hear a really beautiful song, listen to Bird on a Wire. I'm sorry, I got it wrong the first time. Bird on a Wire by Leonard Cohen. It's a terrific song. Go listen to it. We talked about Chris Christopherson. He was a huge Chris Christopherson fan. He also told me about watching his funeral. I think we talked about his funeral a little bit. I told him about my band, Punk Guilt. I told him about some stuff, and he seemed really interested, genuinely interested. And we also talked about relationships. And I told him what had happened, and he told me what had happened to him back in the 60s. The only person he had ever chosen to love on that level, he married, and they had 2 children. But then his wife cheated on him, and he had to leave. And we discussed that. We were very. He was a monogamous thinking person, and so am I, very much so. I'm not into rock and roll to get laid. Let's just put it that way. And neither is he. Neither was he. You know, we talked about our desire to be monogamous with people, to have true relationships, because again, sex is something sacred. It's not something to be, you know, tossed around like a hat. So we talked about, he said he left her, and he couldn't bring himself to be in another relationship ever again, for as long as he was alive. And he wasn't. He said, I just never could go back. I could never trust a woman again. And whereas my situation was, you know, very different, it still was similar. I'm not sure what my person did, but they definitely introduced or wanted to introduce an open relationship. So that, in my mind, indicated that this person did not want to be monogamous. And again, with me being monogamous-minded, I could not go along with that and had to put my foot down. And here I am. But at the end of the conversation with him, he turned to me and he said, hey, man, you know, I need to say one more thing to you before you go. And I'm like, okay. And he says, you know that story I told you about my wife and me leaving? I couldn't bring myself to be with another woman again. And I said, yeah. He says, he just said, don't do what I did. You know, if you manage to find somebody out there who's also monogamously minded and is a really good person, then you should not block them out of your life. And I didn't say anything. I just kind of smiled and said, okay, you know, and I walked away. And that was it. I won't see that guy probably for the rest of my life, unless, of course, I go down to Austin at some point, and who knows, maybe Punk Guilt will end up playing South by Southwest at some point. And if that happens, he said he does hang out at South by Southwest, so, you know, maybe I'll get a chance to see Dennis again. Of course, he's 77 years old. I'm not sure how long it's going to take for us to get to South by Southwest. But yeah, and then the train ride continued. Nothing really happened. I met this couple, this great couple, this husband and wife team, who was traveling all the way from California on some grand adventure for themselves, who actually ended up living in Wisconsin. They rode with me all the way into Milwaukee. Well, not from Denver. We had to stop in Chicago, which was, you know, I'll say this. Chicago was just kind of nothing really happened there, you know. And I've never been a huge fan of Chicago. I don't like the vibes of Chicago. Nonetheless, the vibes seemed a little bit different this time around. I did end up helping some guy who was lost. He was trying to get back to New Orleans, and he was lost and had no idea what to do. In fact, he was trying to, you know, get up money for his ticket, and then he got up the money, and he didn't know how to buy his ticket, and it was just, I was trying to help him out. So I directed him to the right pathways, so he could get home, which was okay. That was a very interesting experience, I suppose. But other than that, nothing really happened. I had a slice of pizza, got on the train again, and here I am. The couple rode with me into Milwaukee. They were really nice. I told them also about, you know, my recent experiences, and also about my band and the fact that I was a musician, and they seemed, you know, to be very enthralled with that tale, and they wrote down my band's name, and they said, hey, we'll look you up, you know, down the road once you guys get started. And they're close. They live right up in Friendship, so yeah, they're close. And they said they'd come. I said, come on down. If you guys see us playing, come on down. I'll get you into the show for free. They're like, okay. And they even seemed okay with it, even though I said we were kind of a punk band, but we're a little bit more of a fusion band, I think. We're not really a punk band. Sure, there are punk aspects to the Punk Guilt sound, but there's a lot of other stuff in there. There's a lot of, there can even be a little bit of blues, a little bit of country sounds, you know, a little bit of jazz, you know, some doom, some sludge, you know, some psychedelic stuff. So we're definitely more of a fusion band. We're not a punk band. So I explained that to them, and they seemed really interested. And they took down my band's name, and they said, okay, yeah, maybe we'll check you out down the road sometime. They got off the bus, and they were waving at me. And so all in all, I had a lot of really great experiences with people. on the way out here, everybody, the people that I ended up talking to were warm. They gave me some really great insights um, into their own lives, which is helping me with what I'm going through. They imparted some wisdom, some truth. So all in all, it was a really great journey out here. There were some other things that happened. However, I think I'm going to go ahead and save that for the next vlog. And again, this is the personal vlog. So the personal vlogs will be separate from the band vlogs. If you guys enjoy what you're seeing, if anything I say has allowed you to think more about your current situation or your life, and it's affected you in some positive way, then I would encourage you to subscribe and to like, because this is going to be a very, very interesting journey. You're essentially going to be watching the creation of a band and the results that come from it. So I'll be back again. I'm not sure when. I'm only going to post these vlogs when they're relevant to either myself or the band. So take care. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And again, we're going to keep things positive here in this space and watch a band grow. Okay? All right, folks. Take care.